The percentage of trans people, so low already. I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me, but it's something like 1 or 2% of our population is trans. So then of that population, what percentage of them are going to be elite level athletes? Let's say less than 1% of that 1 or 2%, right? So there's a very low level of that. And then if you look historically, all of the trans athletes who have been competing, most of them are not actually winning.
So during, over the last 5-10 years, you've really been exploring your identity, and we've spoken about the podcast. What have you learned when it comes to gender? I think this is a whole,
very big, vague statement.
Yeah, it's a very broad statement. I think it's interesting. I'm looking at sport, for example. So I coach elite athletes, and right now in my world, we've got a bit of a disruption when it comes to gender. We're now seeing men who were born men now transitioned into a woman, and they are now competing in a female league. And we're seeing a lot of controversy happening in that way. And I'm looking and I'm forecasting what sport is going to be like in the next 5 years. I think, are we going to have, 3 teams? Is it going to be a transgender team and then male and then female, or is it just female sport is just going to become obsolete? It's playing with me, and this whole world of gender is up for discussion.
I understand the angle and why people are like, yeah, that's not fair when they first hear things, but then once you actually get the facts, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's not a big deal.
Describe it to me, because right now people are probably listening thinking, if you were born a man, then you have the hormones, the testosterone still within you, which makes you more vigorous, more capable of an athlete than a woman. Therefore, it is unfair.
Yeah, so I think that's a very, very, very simple, superficial way to look at things. And there's so many other things to take into account. So from what I learned, speaking to my friend, because I was like, give me the information so I can speak on this when people ask me, because I just it's so important. There's limits in place and kind of like checklist stuff for trans people in sports. Their testosterone levels have to be under a certain level to compete. They are tested already. And when trans women are taking estrogen and going through all of the hormone therapy through transition, they lose a significant amount of muscle mass, of all the things that people think, oh, that makes men really strong and vigorous. They are significantly suppressing that. And it's something after a year of being on hormone therapy with estrogen, it's a massive drop in testosterone levels. And to compete in sports with cisgendered women, trans women have to have been on estrogen for, I think it's something like at least 3 years, something like that. There's a time limit of you've had to be on it this long. Your hormone levels have to be under a certain number. That ends up balancing things out. So that's one thing. There's already stuff in place for this.
I didn't even know that there was it actually makes sense.
There's requirements. There's requirements. So it's, especially when anyone's taking hormones, whether it's somebody who is cisgendered and they're taking it for, I don't know, you're taking birth control, or men are taking testosterone replacement as they age. That's gender affirming care. So we do that already. But then the other thing is, which I find so interesting, sports are inherently unfair. It is not about make everybody equal. Michael Phelps, he's got a massively increased lung capacity. He produces, I think it's either more or less lactic acid than the average person. So he's able to go longer doing more without having that muscle burn and that pain. His wingspan is like way above average. So he's got all of these physical abilities that are not normal for the average person, and it makes it quote unquote unfair for him competing against other swimmers. But people aren't looking at that
because he was born like that.
Because he was born like that.
It's interesting that you said that about Michael Phelps. I always argue that he is in my opinion, probably one of the greatest athletes of our time, regardless of his mental state, which he's been really open about. He's gone through depression and he's been medicated, but in terms of his athletic prowess, I think he's probably one of the best athletes that I've ever seen. And I was a triathlete. I love competing in terms of swimming, so I accept that. What I think I'm battling with when it comes to I've seen this trans woman competing in a football game, and you could see that her athletic ability was far outweighing the athletic abilities of the women, and that's what caused a big uproar in Australia.
Okay.
And then it got me thinking, well, if it makes, if 8 people make up a team, let's just say for argument's sake, what if there is 8 trans women? Yeah. Well, what if there is 8? And then does that then make a female who is born a female obsolete at the end of the day? Because a coach only cares about one thing, and that is winning. The coach does not care at the end of the day. I don't care what you were born, I don't care if you were born a man, but I just care about who's on my team, how we're going to win, because that's how we're going to end up making money and get to,
So your
gold.
concern is, what if all these trans women come in and they replace all the cisgender women and don't give them any opportunity?
Correct.
That's your fear.
Concern. I wouldn't say fear.
Yeah, concern. The percentage of trans people is so low already. I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me, but it's something like 1 or 2% of our population is trans. So then of that population of trans people, what percentage of them are going to be elite level athletes? Let's say less than 1% of that 1 or 2%, right?
Yeah.
So there's a very low level of that. And then if you look historically, all of the trans athletes who have been competing, because there's already been requirements and limitations and, participation things in place, most of them are not actually winning. So the thing is, to be like, what if they all come and take over? That's actually just like, it's kind of fear-mongery.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't think this gender or that gender is better or worse. I think everybody has value and everything should be treated equitably. And it's not. And that is what I don't like.
How isn't it?
I mean, just traditionally, going back however many years, it's just patriarchies reign supreme, and men have been in positions of power for so long. And you know what? I get it. If my group of people was at the top, I would do whatever is possible to maintain that power structure that serves me. So I get why things have gone down the way they have. And that's going to take some time to dismantle and balance out, since things have been on one end of the spectrum for so long, where women have kind of been, we couldn't have bank accounts in the United States until like the 70s? Like, that's insane. Now, and I think this is something that happens in so many different little pockets of society with different groups, is when the oppressed group starts to rise up against the oppressor, no matter who it is. If you want to talk about race, we have, white versus black. If we have men versus women, whatever binary you want to go at. When the oppressed group that has traditionally had less power, less access, starts getting some, then there is this kind of, desire to go way farther and then eventually come back to a balance. Because men have been here for so long, women have been here for so long, and it's like, let's shoot to the top.
Yeah.
Because we've been down here for so long, let's jump as high as we possibly can. And then eventually things will kind of even out into an equilibrium that's sustainable. We don't really know what will happen, because at the same time, things can backfire. We've seen that in political structure. We went from Obama to Trump. Like, sometimes one extreme gets really mad that something's happening and they push back even harder. Women's value in society goes, which is what I think the topic is really about, is I think and I hope that with time, women's value and people of all oppressed groups and classes and backgrounds, I think everybody is starting to have more of a voice and starting to be seen as a full human that deserves to have an equitable amount of value, power, access, impact.
I want to close out by asking you, what if somebody listening is cultural background and they're finding it tough to maybe come out? What are some of the pieces of advice you would give them?
Number 1, do whatever is safest for you. If that means you just come out to yourself, that's enough. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way. There's no right way to do it. You can tell one person, you can tell your whole family, you can tell the world and post it on social media, whatever you want to do. But if you are struggling, I think keeping in mind that your worth is not tied to how your loved ones see you, I think that's really important to remember. And it's really hard to remember that you're more than how your parents view you or how you're perceived. And life is hard and sucks. Just choose the thing that gives you the best chance at happiness. We're only here for so long.
Some of us here longer than others, depending on how well we take care of ourselves.
True.
But Kittens, thank you so much for being part of the Neuro Experience podcast.